Holly Duckworth here, Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique Practitioner Level 3. And I wanted to share this session segment with you today. It's so exciting. I get into this very long conversation with a client's higher self about enlightenment. What enlightenment even is, how to achieve enlightenment, and what kinds of things can block us or prevent us from being on that path to enlightenment. Cool stuff. So let's get right to it. Listen in.
Enlightenment is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Enlightenment is not a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Enlightenment is the opposite of a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Enlightenment is a releasing of the bounds, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, which is the opposite of a feeling of a requirement.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Enlightenment is a flow. And in the gift of enlightenment, there is connection to all there is.
So is that what you showed her? That soul, that place where they were playing and creating, and witnessing every facet of love? Would that be an example of an enlightened place? An enlightened experience?
Yes.
Ah, very good. Very good. Very good. And so then if I'm hearing you correctly, in my interpretation, you showed her that place, that time, that moment, that experience, as kind of a, here's the definition of enlightenment. Was that your purpose? Did I get that right?
Well, it's more about not in those exact words, but it's more about the possibility. This is what's possible.
Okay. Very good. Very good.
And the mental constructs that have been very carefully constructed, laid out, very with much precision, are inherently blocking that from happening.
Okay, very good.
Limiting that possibility. Although the possibility seeps through the cracks of the construct, until the construct is identified, but not identified. It's more about becoming aware. So allowing the awareness to happen, not forcing identification. So it's the exact opposite. So it's not about the mind identifying itself. It's about the soul becoming aware so that those constructs can be dismantled but not crushed down. The crushing down doesn't serve, because it doesn't have to be that harsh. They need to come down, but they can come down in a way that the human, the personality is not affronted. That the personality can can grow and will be pleased with the dissolution of the mental constructs that are keeping the light away, or that keep the light from shining brightly. The personality, it's important to understand that the personality works, can not always, but can work with the soul and the higher beings to deconstruct the ego in a way that the ego is not, doesn't push back so hard, that the personality can actually benefit and expand and become more and more and more light. So the light shines from the person, from originally from the heart and the soul, but it expands through the personality and into the world. And this is the most important thing, because the mental constructs are keeping that light from shining brightly out into the world, and bringing that light to the world, and helping the world, or the earth, in its upliftment and evolutionary process, which was the goal of the soul in coming to this planet, is to bring light to this planet and to enlighten. So spiritual advancement and enlightenment is important for the advancement of the being, but it's equally, if not more important, that the goal of the soul in coming to the planet is to bring light to the planet in the most powerful way possible, and those two things are they work hand in hand, because in bringing that light to the planet, the personality doesn't have a choice but to become enlightened. And so the biggest thing that's keeping that from happening is the mental constructs and the belief systems that have been constructed, whether in this lifetime or in past lifetimes, that have been brought forth into this lifetime. Those are the most important things. There's nothing else. The emotions are fine. The emotional body is evolved. The emotional body of this being is evolved. It's the mental constructs that have been erected to keep the being safe.
Okay, so what we find here is that enlightenment isn't really something to achieve, it's a gift. We have to be in a state of allowing, in a state of releasing any kind of mental constructs in order to allow the gift of enlightenment to come to us. Our soul is ready to give us that gift, but we kind of have to release and dismantle our precise and rigid mental constructs. I find this really interesting because in so many ways we have these, big recipes or these religious type of dogmatic ways in which we're to achieve enlightenment. And what we're learning through this QHHT session is it's more about allowing, and it's more about releasing. And it can be something really very, very gentle. It isn't a thing where we have to completely deconstruct and dismantle the ego. It can be a very gentle release and allowing.
But the issue or the problem with that is those constructs were erected in the worst times of life, and the safety was had, and there's no longer any reason for the mental constructs, so long as there's awareness from within the soul and within the personality of the lack of need of the constructs. Because so long as the personality believes that it needs the constructs, then the constructs cannot be dismantled because the personality, but that begs the question, well, how does the personality no longer believe that it no longer needs those constructs? And that is where the spiritual evolution comes into play, because the personality is 100% dependent for its safety on either the mental constructs or the spiritual advancement.
Very good, very good, very good. So, how then does she move forward? How does she specifically allow her personality to tear down the constructs? Or maybe that's not a great way to think about it, but to release the constructs that she's become aware of, that she's been absorbed in, that the personality's been absorbed in.
Well, yes, and so this is the question that everyone should be asking, actually. And because the personality must become aware of the light inside. Because the light inside, the light inside the heart is the most powerful energy source of the whole being. And to become aware of the light and how that is being overshadowed or blocked or just awareness, allowing the awareness to come, and in that allowing to have that allowing happen requires silence. Awareness comes forth in its magnitude in silence, and that is the rub, because the mental doesn't like silence. The soul flourishes in silence. And so what has to happen is the personality has to become strong enough, and this may be an exercise in pure will. The personality must become strong enough to create a rebalancing of, so that the soul energy and that high level energy becomes stronger than the mental energy. And this is not a easy. It can be easy, but humans tend to make it not easy.
I think one of the things that you said earlier, maybe this helps, I don't know, but sometimes there's this thought process amongst humans that it's either the soul or the ego. It's either the higher self or the lower self. But what I heard you say earlier is that it isn't about no ego, no personality. It's about allowing the light to shine through the ego personality.
Yes.
Okay.
So the personality is required to be on the planet. The ego is actually of the survival. Right. So the ego. So there is actually a difference between the ego and the personality, in that the ego is completely consumed in the survival, and so the ego does everything possible for the survival of the being. The personality joins in that, in so much as what else is there to do. However, when the personality starts becoming enlightened, then the personality says, "Oh, there is this to do now." And so the personality can actually help dismantle the constructs of the mental and the ego. So the ego is part of the mental, but the so the personality can work on both sides, so there has to be a shifting of the balance for the personality to begin, not to begin, to work full force in enlightening itself as a personality, in bringing the soul fully forth, and in that process, the ego and the mental constructs get dismantled. Now there is an active process of dismantling, but it doesn't have to be forceful. It can happen both in the active dismantling, which can be gentle yet direct, and there is an allowing as the soul, as the personality works more with the soul and allows that the soul to come forth in its fullness and brightness. Then the mental constructs, just by their nature, they can't continue to hold on. In this body, when the pet, the dog, decided to, or was called away, and left the body, the way this body talks about what happened is that the mental constructs or the constructs or the belief systems came crashing down, and that is not inaccurate. That can actually happen when there is a significant loss, as was experienced. There was a significant loss, and it takes much energy to maintain mental constructs, and often that happens behind the scenes. So it's not even in the awareness or the consciousness of the human to know that that's what's happening, that so much energy is going to maintain those constructs until there is a time when that energy is not available and must be put to different use, and then those mental constructs cannot survive. And the trick here too is that there are layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of mental constructs, and so many came crashing down, and it wasn't all of them, because that would be an impossibility at this time, but many came crashing down, and now each one of those is being brought up to say, is this accurate going forward? And so now this human is being given the choice. Do you want to use this piece of that former mental construct in your future, not necessarily mental construct, but in your future creation of life? And this human is saying yes or no. And so this awareness is actually coming forth in waves of magnitude never before allowed by this human, because of this opening. The loss created the opening, and there was no other way for it to happen.
Very good.
And and so this actually had to happen in this exact way, at this exact time, for the next, because there is another planet Earth is evolving, and there is another time, that's not quite the right word, but there's another opportunity, experience, that there will be another life that this human can create if that's what's chosen. And many humans, though, they have this opportunity and they don't choose to create a new life. They choose to patch up what was before, because that's familiar. So it actually takes quite some courage to create a whole new life once an opening occurs, because it's the nature of the ego and the personality supporting the ego to not want to change. So when an opening occurs, no matter how that opening occurs, usually some kind of loss or trauma, it's the nature of the ego for survival to keep things the same. And it's an opportunity, and this human is actually seems to be taking advantage of this opportunity to make some grand changes in life going forward. And this is what we desire. This is what's needed going forward for the soul to meet its need, or not need, purpose on planet Earth at this time, in this body, in this lifetime. And now there may be other lifetimes, but it's not required to have other lifetimes on this planet. But there's significant work that needs to be done by this human to make that possible. And it is possible. It just is going to require some perseverance, and this human does persevere in many ways. And there is, and I say this with all love and no judgment, there are times when this human hangs on by a thread, it seems, and it takes more to accomplish what is possible. It takes more than hanging on by a thread. It takes actual all in all the time. And this human seems to be in a place where that's possible, all in all the time, with no judgment of not being all in all the time. It's just that with such grandiose possibilities and desires, this human has great desires for being in touch with, or being at a depth of communication with all beings unseen, with all beings seen but with no language that is common, such as English or another human language,
like with animals or trees or whatever.
Yes. That's totally possible with an expansion of consciousness. It does require this expansion of consciousness, though, that this human has not experienced in this lifetime and many other lifetimes. So the expansion of consciousness is a new, like almost an exploration for this human, but it's completely possible with an all in all the time mindset. And Earth, one of the things of Earth is that there are so many distractions and so many ways to that humans are pulled off of their path, the path that they've chosen, or the path that their soul would like them to choose. And so that is another rub about being on planet Earth, is evolving in the face of so many distractions. And that is that it's very courageous, and it's worth acknowledging that the humans that are on a spiritual path and that are committed, whether it's by a thread or all in all the time or anywhere in between, it's worth acknowledging that is an accomplishment, that is truly worthy of accolades and applause, and the beings that are here to help are applauding all humans, all souls that are here and on their spiritual path and maintaining that, whether it's by a thread or all in all the time or anywhere in between. And this human has been in both, by a thread, all in all the time, or at least all in most of the time, or some of the time, or somewhere in between, and recognizing distractions and not knowing this human has some the distraction of confusion sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And there is actually no confusion. That's a mental construct. Confusion is a mental construct. And so being aware of the, not just the distraction of the world, but the distraction of the mental is that is the next higher place to go. Is the distraction of the mental, not the higher level mental, but the subtle mental, which is can be very difficult for a human mind or a limited awareness, whether or not it's growing or not. It could be that a human is growing in their awareness, which almost all humans are, to some degree, but to recognize the complexity and the subtlety of the mental constructs that's a higher level of awareness and knowing, and it can require some unwinding of those things. Although it could be also as simple as pulling the string and everything unfolds or unwinds. And so you just have to find the right string to pull. You could pull many, many strings, and it pulls that string and nothing else until you find the right string, and you pull that string and the tapestry unravels. So the mental construct can be like a tapestry in that way, and it can be thick. And it can be stubborn, and what is required of the person, of the human, is just diligence and determination, and devotion to this process, devotion to the soul, devotion to the higher self, devotion to the ultimate goal, devotion to it. Well, plainly, devotion to a rock, devotion to whatever. And living from a place of that devotion in all ways. It doesn't matter what the devotion is to in actuality. But having for the mental body and for the brain and for the mind to grab onto something, it helps the human to have a construct to say, I'm devoted to this, and then to practice that devotion, and in that devotion becomes single-mindedness, and in single-mindedness, that's when the distraction of the mind and all of its shenanigans, because the mind is full of shenanigans, and the mind is full of every single thing that can pull away from the single point of focus. And so when that single point of focus is reached, just know that the mind will do everything it can to pull you away until that single point of focus, until the focus becomes strong enough that the mind can't pull the focus away willy-nilly.
Can't be distracted.
It can't be distracted in the normal ways. And so then at that point, with that single point of focus, that's when awareness of the subtleties of the mind can actually expand, and those things can be revealed very precisely and specifically. But it does require a focus, and it requires a persistence. And with this human, this has been a point of discouragement, and it's very understandable that it is a point of discouragement, because the mind is so powerful, and this human has built up such incredible, really, mental constructs, and it's incredible in both good and bad ways, because incredible in that, wow, these are some pretty complex mental constructs. However, on the flip side, it's going to take some equal power, equal determination and decisiveness to unravel them as well. So for this human, the brain has been a most magnificent thing, and it has, but it has also been that brain has been able to, because in its early years, the brain was so perceptive. The brain was so finely tuned in to every energy, and that every energy, and some of those energies felt very threatening. And so the brain and the ego that was being built in those young years felt compelled to build these constructs to protect from that energy. And when this human talks about that she was cut off from the angels at 4 years old, that's not untrue. However, it was what happened was that the mental constructs started being built at that time, and it's not that the angels were perceived as a threat, but there was no discernment in building mental constructs to protect from the perceived threat of some of the lower frequency energies, and from the angelic energies as well. So those mental constructs are still there, and are still and these mental constructs are keeping this human from being in oneness, in one ship, in unity, in the type of communication and relationship that she seems to so desperately desire with these energetic beings, and with the energies on the planet, the beneficial energies on the planet to be in communion with, as well as being able to transmute the low frequency energies. So this being desires to transmute these low frequency energies, and that is totally possible. That is completely possible. And this being would like to be able to perceive the difference, which she was not able to do as a very young child, and she just hasn't had the connection yet. And so this is what I'm bringing. I'm bringing this connection. So what this human is asking for is completely possible, and was possible in her very young years. And she just had to build the construct. This again, there is no judgment there. Right. This is only said in love. But because this human was so sensitive, so very sensitive as a very young child, and these mental constructs had to be constructed to protect this child according to the ego, although there was no protection actually needed, but the ego thought that there needed to be protection.
It was doing its job.
Doing its job very, very well, along with the brain, because the brain was in on that. But now those protections are no longer needed, because this human is very capable of defending herself with the light. And so dissolving these mental constructs is the only way. Dissolving these mental constructs, having one singular focus at a time, not one singular focus in all aspects of life. It would be like focusing on a banana all the time. That's not necessary. But having one singular focus at all times to push out the distractions.
Okay, so we learned that loss can be a teacher. And we have this long conversation here, this wisdom coming from the higher self about the role between the ego and the personality and the soul, and how the personality is kind of a go-between, that the ego is going to be focused on fear, is going to be focused on these rigid mental constructs to keep the body safe, but that the personality can rise above that, and the personality can be working with the soul to release and allow the enlightenment. We learn that loss can be a teacher, and that can be a moment to reset. That can be a moment to build an entirely new life. And they're encouraging us, don't patch up the old, don't go back to the old just because it's familiar. When you have a sudden shift, when you have a big change in your life, could be loss. What an opportunity to build a whole new life. So what they're encouraging us to do here is to be all in all the time and allowing this state of enlightenment to be your life. So to just allow and release and partner with your higher self. And how do we do that? We do that in moments of quiet. We do that in moments of connection, of really listening to that super subtle voice that is the higher self. Cool stuff about enlightenment. Thank you for listening.